Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price. $1 million man. Everybody's got a price.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are back for another episode of Everybody's Got a Pod. And of course, I could not do it without the $1 million man himself, Ted DiBiase. Ted, what's going on?
Marcus, it's you, buddy. I tell you what, you couldn't do it. I couldn't do this by myself. That's for sure. So I'm glad that I have you. I mean, and just I've told you this, privately, but publicly, I'll just say it. I said, your research and the things that you find out about or delve into that was so far back, stuff that I had forgotten.
Really, for me, this whole thing is it's a labor of love because, I'm friends with you and Jake and a lot of the guys, but at my core, I'm a wrestling fan. And for me to do this research, I get to go back and watch some of these great matches and talk about some incredible moments. And man, I love doing it. And, before you and I hit record today, we were discussing some of the recent happenings over there in AEW. Most notably, Sting's last match just took place, AEW Revolution. And man, Sting got a send-off like I would guess most people in wrestling would absolutely die for. AEW treated him very, very well. So incredible to see Sting kind of go out on his terms that way. Today we're talking about Royal Rumble 1991, and I can't wait to get into these notes. However, before we do, I did want to touch on what you and I discussed here right before we started recording, which is at AEW Revolution, Will Ospreay, a guy who's considered by many to be the best professional wrestler in the world today, has made his AEW debut. And man, what a phenomenal athlete Will Ospreay is. He's gotten all these rave reviews from people, and he's pretty much been anointed as the best that there is in the world. Ted, when you hear about distinctions like that, best in the world, especially from where you sit as a wrestling veteran yourself, what do you make of it?
Okay, well, here's what I would say, and this guy may be very good, but if he's not a good storyteller, he's not the best in the world. If he is the guy who has got the great body and he takes a lot of really great bumps and all that flying around, that don't make a wrestler. And this is something I've talked about here before, and I will continue to beat the drum. Wrestling as I knew it and as I grew up in it, and I know everything changes, but what changed it? It's kind of like when you go to a movie, it's a movie when you walk in, it's not real. But the actors in the movie, if they play their parts well, they draw you into the story they're telling. They can make you laugh. They can make you cry. And they can, it's kind of like, and what I don't see anymore is great stories, a great match, just flying around the ring and taking pretty bumps, no matter how good they are. A triple somersault off the top rope and you land on your feet and everybody goes, woo, okay, big deal. Tell me a story. It's like, in every story, in every movie you watch, there's it's like wrestling. There's a good guy and a bad guy, there's a good entity and a bad entity. And the movie is, the basic story is the bad guys screw up, they make, or do whatever they're going to do. And the rest of the story is about the good guys trying to come up and gradually get to a place where they can lower the hammer on the bad guys. I don't see that anymore. You heard it right here, and I'll go to my grave. I've and these conversations I've had with guys, Terry Funk, Dory Funk Jr., who's still alive. Several guys that And I asked them, I said, am I missing something or am I right? And they all said, you're right. So it's, Wrestling is not, so it wasn't meant to be a tumbling act. I hope I've made sense with that.
Yes, you have, and it's I think that there's a place in wrestling for guys with phenomenal move sets and that do incredible things, but it's about doing it the right way, much like a Rey Mysterio did it the right way, where it's like you could when Rey Mysterio was a
Thank,
babyface, he put himself in danger.
thank you, very Marcus. That's an excellent example. Because here's a guy who could fly all over the ring, and man, he was great at it. But when he had his matches, he told a story. And the story that Rey Mysterio told was most of the time, whoever his opponent was much bigger than him. And the story was about how is this little guy going to overcome this big guy? And that was the story. And Ray would sell for a good portion of the match, and then when it was time for him to make that comeback and start doing all that stuff that he does, then the people just pop and go crazy until he lowers the boom. 1, 2, 3. That's a good example.
And now, is that the advice that you would give to a young performer like Will Ospreay? Like, hey, look, keep being you, keep all your athletic, incredible moves, but maybe let's just start to look to hone in on storytelling and selling.
It's so important. It really is. And I hope the fans understood that. But
Yeah, I think they do, and would look, anytime you talk about a modern star that fans are really passionate about, it's going to be met with some criticism. Some people are going to say, it's we always hear that guys even from your generation, like an old timer, would come into the locker room and they'd be like, yeah, this guy, he's old fashioned. He's used to the old days when it was just all mat wrestling for an hour. But every generation of wrestling evolves and changes, so this might be met with some criticism, but I mean, you're criticizing constructively.
Yeah, constructively. It's like, well, I'll just be honest. I said, I don't watch much wrestling anymore because it doesn't excite me. It's like, again, just being honest, I watch these guys bounce all over the ring. Okay, that was a great bump. Yeah, okay. We'll sell it. If I took a bump over the top rope and hit the floor, I wouldn't bounce up like a jackrabbit and get back in the ring. I would lay there on the floor and sell it. It's like when you go to a movie, and the good guy gets hurt. He sells it. He's wounded or whatever, and
Yep.
It's a story about him climbing back out. How's he going to get out of that hole? How's he going to do it? Anyway, I don't want to just go on and on.
No, look, I'm with you. That's the brand of professional wrestling that I've always preferred. So I hope that we can meet.
And I would hope that you have heard the same from Jake,
Yes.
from Arn.
Yep.
Who else?
Hacksaw.
Hacksaw.
All the guys that I've worked with over the years say the same thing, and it almost always boils down to like, God, we were never athletes like these guys were. Phenomenal athletes, unbelievable, unmatched, but none of them sell. And that's really kind of what it comes down to. And I don't know. I hope that whenever people hear this, young wrestlers, old wrestlers, anybody, they kind of just look inward instead of say like, hey, that's not right. They're talking about me.
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing is I would, and again, good. Okay, I'm gonna make a challenge to any of the new talent in the WWE. Number one, you started out being a fan. Thank you very much for loving something that I grew up in and loved with my whole heart. But I want you to take this challenge. Go back and watch matches between Jake and me, Jake and whoever, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and guys like Terry Funk, Ricky Steamboat, and watch their matches and tell me if the match is, as you watch it, if you can watch that match and tell me you're not pulling for Ricky Steamboat to make a big comeback, but in the way wrestling is presented today, nobody ever sells long enough for there to be a meaningful comeback.
Couldn't agree more. And look, we're looking forward to a great episode today. You know, Ted, in light of the unfortunate passing of your friend and former bodyguard Virgil, I thought it might be a good time to take a look back at what is considered the greatest angle from his career and a memorable one from yours too. The night that Virgil had enough of your shit. Uh, so, so, man, there's a lot. There's so much to cover here about this period of time. We'll start back in December of 1990. He'll turn on you at the Royal Rumble, but let's do a full build up so we can get everybody really caught up. The 12/17/1990 Observer has a couple of interesting notes. First is this one about an imminent change between yourself and your bodyguard. Obvious from watching TV this weekend that a Virgil turn on DiBiase is in the works. If the NWA ever did something as racist as DiBiase's comments, there's only one thing lower than a Texan, and that's you, Virgil. And having Virgil shine his shoes, they'd have a lynch mob after them. Titan has no excuse for running crap like that, either as entertainment in 1990. So some strong criticism of the angle where you're forcing Virgil to shine your shoes. I don't know, Ted. It's probably not a storyline that would really fly today. But damn, I mean, what a setup for Virgil.
Yeah, and I think you're probably right because, there's, all of that racial stuff is so, it's kind of like, everybody said, no, Ted DiBiase is not a racist. Junkyard Dog, who was a great in his own time, excellent on the mic, was the best man at my wedding. So you have no room to call me a racist. It has nothing to do. Let's put it this way: if Virgil was a white guy, I would make the same criticisms of him that I am of Virgil.
Absolutely, and that's what I was going to say. I think that if Virgil was portrayed by, let's say, somebody like Steve Kern, this storyline would have happened in the exact same way, where you're forcing him to shine your shoes and taking advantage of him and putting him in this position where the fans want him to stand up for himself, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I don't think that Meltzer was calling you a racist. I think that he was just saying that the angle was racist. But I don't know. Again, it's what a great setup for Virgil to finally make his comeback on you.
Well, again, in the storytelling of wrestling, what a great thing to do is like when he finally does stand up. I know you're gonna show it, man. The people just went nuts, and it was great.
Dude, such an unbelievable angle, and I don't think it would have worked as well if you weren't just kind of treating him like absolute dirt. And at the same time, you're also telling the story about he needs money for his mother, and that's why he's doing this. And he's struggling to get by, and he doesn't want to be your bodyguard, but he just needs the money so bad. And finally, he's going to stand up for himself and get opportunity. I don't know. It's look. I understand why there's so much criticism of the angle. However, I do not think that the intention was to shine a negative light on Virgil as an effort.
The intention was obviously, the intention was to build enough animosity in this guy that he does haul off and hit me. I mean, the whole deal is like the people watching it every week, they're thinking to themselves, Virgil, I mean, knock his head off. And that's what we wanted them to get excited about, because he eventually does.
He does, and we are going to watch the clip here. It's coming up soon. Before we get there, I think it's also worth noting that the Nasty Boys will debut at the company on 12/11/1990. Ted, would this have marked the first time that you were around knobs and sags?
I think so. These guys, they are as, I don't know how funny they came across on TV, but behind the scenes, they're two of the funniest guys, especially Knobs. Oh gosh, he was a funny guy, and some of the pranks that he would pull and stuff. I don't know, he's just too much. But yeah, hey, I love them both.
Man, a couple of characters and a couple of very rough, actually rugged dudes. I mean, not a pair of guys you want to mess with. Apparently, Ken Shamrock found that out the wrong way as he was trying to break into wrestling. But but yeah, I mean, those guys, Nasty Boys is probably a good way to describe them. Knobs allegedly could get to be a little bit too much, where maybe you'd be on the plane, you're hungover, not exactly ready to be social, and Knobs is climbing on there being loud and obnoxious. Did you ever have any of those experiences with him?
Well, I didn't personally have any experiences with him like that, but I was on a lot of the planes where other guys had that experience with him.
It's funny. Jake told me recently that at one point I think Knobs was annoying him, and he said, Brian, if you keep pissing people off like this, eventually you're gonna get stabbed or something. And Knobs was like, come on, it won't happen. And about 2 weeks later, he got stabbed by somebody. so, Jake is just calling it. But Knobs also apparently had a reputation for not being shy about exposing himself as a joke to the guys. Did you ever have the misfortune of seeing him naked?
Yeah, it's so horrifying that I just have put it out of my mind.
I wish we had Blue Chew this week. That would be a great spot for the sponsorship. All right, let's get back to normal wrestling talk.
Okay.
December 1990 also marks the incident with Chuck Austin, where he will be paralyzed in the ring after a botched rocker dropper from Marty Jannetty. The whole thing is going to lead to a lawsuit, and Chuck is eventually going to settle with the WWF for $10 million. Do you have any recollection of this incident and the fallout?
Well, I have recollection. I had recollection of the incident, but then I never heard anything more about it. And I didn't hear anything more about it. I never heard anybody talk about a settlement or anything. And until you just said it.
Yeah, apparently Marty had to pay him $500,000 of Marty's own money. And then the WWF I think they were initially slated to pay him something like $25 million, but it was going to take a lot more litigation. And so they settled out of court for 10.
Wow.
So, awful for a guy to get paralyzed like that in the ring. Absolutely terrifying. Ted, I can't remember if I've asked you this question or not before. Obviously, you must not have witnessed this. I feel like you probably would have remembered it. Did you ever witness somebody, breaking their neck or suffering a severe injury like that in the ring?
Nothing that severe. I mean, guys get hurt, break an arm, break a wrist or something, lose a tooth, but nothing that devastating.
Did you ever have a tooth knocked out?
I didn't have one knocked out. It's like, I remember used to do a spot where I would back a guy into the turnbuckle and just hammer him a bit, and I would go to turnbuckle him across the ring, and I would tell him reverse the turnbuckle. And so when he would reverse it and I would go in, instead of going in the normal way and hitting the turnbuckle on my back, I would go through the middle and top rope and hit my shoulder on the post.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course that would mean when I come out of there, now I'm favoring my shoulder, and he goes to work on my arm, my shoulder. And in doing that one night, I got a little bit too close to the ring post, and I chipped, I chipped one. I can't remember which. This one. I chipped it, and of course I had to, have, like, so this is it's a permanent false tooth.
Oh, so was it like an implant or something they had to put in?
Well, yeah, it's like, it's hard to explain how they do that, but yeah.
I know they like drill into like your bone or something with it, right?
Yeah.
Ooh, man, it's not ballet, pal, as they say. So, Ted, you're going to be working with Kerry Von Erich during this time, who has really risen in the WWF as a top babyface. You'll be working with him on house shows, and you're kind of partnered with Mr. Perfect, which you and I talked about on the recent Ask Ted Anything. Somebody asked, hey, did they ever think about making a tag team partner out of Mr. Perfect for you? The answer is yes. Here in December, you guys were actually set to do it, but you're going to suffer an injury, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Kerry is having an issue with Perfect at the time, and so you're stepping into the ring with Kerry. What did you think about working with Kerry Von Erich?
Kerry was, he was a nice kid for sure, but he wasn't real easy to work with.
Mm.
I mean, the Von Erich grew up in the wrestling business, but you know, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I had the matches I had with Kerry. I think they were okay, but I don't think I ever had an exceptional match with Kerry Von Erich. Do you?
I don't know that there were any that were televised. Now, I could be wrong, so I'll have to do some research and see if I can find some footage of you working with him. But it's for reference for everybody, and maybe for you, I'm not sure how much of this you know. Kerry had just come off of essentially being the owner of the Dallas territory, along with his brother and Jerry Jarrett. They were the three that were running the territory. I think that Fritz had kind of stepped back and let the boys run the business. So he's going from that where he's his own boss. And by the way, maybe rumor has it he was enjoying some extracurriculars and wasn't always showing up to the shows, and there were no repercussions for that behavior. So now all of a sudden he's working for the WWF and he's got a boss to answer to.
Yeah.
So probably a big change for Kerry. I would guess that he probably wanted to do things his way in the ring.
And he had an accident where he lost a foot, right?
Yes, a motorcycle accident in
Yeah.
1986. So he'd been working on this prosthetic leg for a while, and most guys said they couldn't really tell the difference with him in the ring.
No, and that was, to me, that was pretty good.
Impressive.
The fact that he could do that was impressive, so for sure.
Now, I've heard a few guys over the years say that they witnessed some of his self-destructive behavior. Obviously, Kerry would eventually commit suicide, which is a really sad story.
Yeah.
Did you ever see anything of that nature around Kerry, or were you not spending much time with him?
Well, I didn't socialize with Kerry a lot. I mean, of course, I don't know what all he was doing. I'm assuming that he was taking pills and what have you, and guys get into that. I mean, it's kind of like, I can't remember if I can't remember who I was talking to just recently about that. And, talking about, I know, I watched the movie, about Elvis Presley,
Mm.
And they talked about when he was going on those tours and he was going city to city and you're talking about flying into a city, going and doing a concert. Now you do the concert and you're it. There is no other attraction. He's out on that stage singing for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Or more. And then, you know what, they get, sometimes they would stay over, but a lot of times, and if they did stay over, they were out early the next day, getting to the next city because it was go, 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 go. And so, I had been there. I mean, it wasn't like I never took a pill, so I would be awake to wrestle. But what I was afraid of, I was always afraid of falling asleep at the wheel while I was driving.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I ever took a pill, and I occasionally, I don't know what they call them, bennies or whatever. But I mean, I actually went to a doctor and he gave me something. He says, if this is what you need, take this. And I would take that. So it's like after a match or something. So I wasn't, because I'll give you an example. We would get up, we would wrestle in Monroe, in New Orleans on Monday and go back, and everybody stayed in Baton Rouge. It's only 80 miles. Then on Tuesday, we would wrestle in Baton Rouge. Okay. So Wednesday morning, we would get up and we would drive all the way. It was 240 miles to Shreveport on a one-lane road. And we would do our interviews in Shreveport on Wednesday, have lunch, and get in our car and drive to Jackson, Mississippi, where I live now, and wrestle that night. And then after that match, get in the car and drive another 180 miles all the way back to Baton Rouge.
Mm.
So, yeah, there were times when, I would take something to, help me, stay awake. But, things like that always scared me. So I never, the whole thing about addiction, and I was like, no, like, um, it's kind of like, sometimes I take the pill, and sometimes I just, drink a thermos full of coffee.
Man, good for you for being able to kind of stay on the straight and narrow. I mean, a lot of guys from this era struggled. Kerry wasn't alone in it, but you had made the Elvis comparison. I think that's a good comparison for what Kerry and his brothers must have been dealing with in Dallas, where like these guys are local heroes in Dallas to probably roughly the same level of fame, where
Yeah,
women want to be with them all the time. They're traveling place to place. People are cheering them. They're getting free things from people everywhere they go.
yeah,
So it's like that's a lot of responsibility for anybody. And I think that, unfortunately, Kerry kind of fell into the trap of all of it. And yeah, it's wound up getting its hold on him.
yeah, yeah. So, but I mean, I had the matches I had with Kerry, I would say they were okay. It wasn't. I mean, he grew up in the business like I did, so he was not unaware. But uh, it wasn't the greatest match I ever had either. It's kind of like depending on how he was that night.
Well, the week of Christmas 1990, it's announced on the shows that you're scheduled for that you will not be appearing. And this is apparently due to you having to get your knee scoped on the 26th. So, Ted, this is the day after Christmas 1990, and you're getting that knee cleaned up a little bit. So, at what point do you realize that, it's just the knee is past the breaking point where you're just like, I cannot do another match on this knee? Like, is it swelling or what kind of stuff are you dealing with?
It's hard to describe, Marcus. Yeah, the pain or like I would kind of feel like it's almost like it would slip, like something would slip out, and I would, oh my gosh, I can't, and but just basically, it was just basically the pain because I was wearing like like a those like a small knee brace that had the almost like what do you call it on both sides.
Oh shit, what do they call that?
Anyway, well, I was wearing one of those, and then a wrestling knee pad over it.
This is the period of time when if you don't work, you don't get paid. So, talking to other wrestlers, I also know that this is very much the era of protecting your spot, especially with new talents arriving in the company all the time.
Exactly. And
So,
yeah, that's a crazy thing about wrestling is, it's kind of like when you tell people, like during the territorial era, nobody was on a contract.
mhm.
You know, uh, you were probably classed by in terms of your ability or your ability to get over, and whether you were at the bottom of the card, in the middle of the card, or at the top of the card. But even if you're the main event guy, it's like you weren't getting there was no guarantee, none. And so you were really at the mercy of the promoters. And it's like if you didn't like something and you got and you just decide, okay, I'm quitting, I'm leaving, and most of them would just say, well, there's the door.
That's scary, especially you're a man with a family at this point, and yep, you're a well-established guy. You're a well-established heel, but for frame of reference, right now the hottest heel in the company is Sergeant Slaughter because he's doing the Iraqi Sympathizer thing, and now here you are. It's the holiday season, and the traditionally nice payoffs and big houses, and you have to miss out on that. So whenever you step away to get your knee surgery, would you say that you had some anxiety or fear of job security?
Well, no, because at least I think I understood at least that uh, I was. I don't want to sound braggadocious.
You were valuable.
I knew that my value was greater than just another guy on the card. That I was, I was either in the main event, or I was just under the main event for the better part of most of the second half of my career.
Well said. I don't think that came off braggadocious. It's just fact. You
Yeah.
were you and I have talked about it here before on the show. You know, you can one of the most consistently over heels ever in the history of wrestling.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's I sort of knew the answer going into that. Like if anybody's got a secure place on the card, it's probably Ted DiBiase.
Yeah.
Well, while you're recovering, Percy Pringle makes his way to the WWF, and we all know that he would become Paul Bearer as a manager for The Undertaker. Percy is a guy with a lot of history in the business at this point. What can you tell us about your experiences with him?
I love that guy. I mean, he just an all-around good person, and played that gimmick to the hilt. It's kind of like I used to love to hear him talk and cut the interviews and everything and introduce the Undertaker. I mean, actually, you know who introduced the Undertaker the first night that he walked to the ring?
I do, but go ahead. Yep.
Me. And of course, nobody at that time had any idea, that the Undertaker and that character would reach the heights of popularity that it did. But I mean, Taker ended up being one of the most well-known of all time, for sure.
Man, beyond over. And I mean, a guy like Percy, with his history and his knowledge of the business, I mean, what do you feel a guy like him brought to the table for a guy like Taker, who was still pretty young in the business at the time?
Well, I mean, it was just a unique manager. Because at that time, I don't think that Taker was cutting his own interviews, was he?
I think that Percy was doing the heavy lifting. Before him, it was Bruce Pritchard, his brother Love, who was his manager. But yeah, he was keeping it pretty stoic.
Right. And but again, to Mark's credit, it's like to have a match, and again, you never saw him walk at a regular pace anywhere. To the ring, from the ring, but get in the ring and have to slow down your movement. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And still get a match over. That's not easy.
I mean, just on the surface too, if you look at the creative that he's given, where it's like, hey, we're gonna bring you in, you're this big guy, you've got this great look, a lot of awesome ring skills. You're gonna be a dead guy, so you're gonna be a walking corpse. That's our gimmick for you. And we're gonna stick you with this cartoon character guy who looks like he's from the Addams Family, and he's making all sorts of weird noises and stuff like that during his interviews. It's like on the surface, it's like, well, that shit's just never gonna get over, but it got over maybe better than any other gimmick ever.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, and I told Mark this, like. I said, Mark, I've always thought you were a hell of a guy. I said, but when you first showed up and I first heard, your manager cut a couple of those interviews, and I can't even make my voice get that high. I didn't have high hopes for you. But I mean, everybody's, surprise, it ended up being one of the greatest of all time.
Beyond a doubt. Well, look, the biggest storyline in the WWF at the time, I mentioned it. It's about to reach a fever pitch, and I'd love to hear your take on it. We have this from the January 21st Observer. Lots of news from here in recent days. At this writing, a possible war could break out in the Middle East within hours. That has become a significant factor considering the original idea for this year's WrestleMania appears to have been Hulk versus Sergeant Slaughter on top. Originally, Hogan was going to visit the troops and Slaughter was going to go heavy into the Iraqi gimmick. None of this may change, or it may. The USO has denied the WWF's request to send Hogan to Saudi Arabia, so that is out the window. The Iraqi embassy is very hot at Vince McMahon because of his portrayal of Sergeant Slaughter and General Adnan. a lot of officials are worried that there may be legitimate fan violence should shooting actually break out in the Middle East because of the nature of the characters. The embassy has also demanded McMahon quit using Saddam Hussein's name in the hype for Slaughter, which may not be the worst idea given the current situation. So, Ted, I mean, look, up to this point, Slaughter had been leaning heavily into this Iraqi sympathizer thing, but the game changes a little bit with the potential for an actual war breaking out. What did you think of the new gimmick for Sarge, and did you see that kind of nuclear heat starting to get to the fans?
Well, yeah, and and I think most of the other guys felt the same way. It's like, the last thing you want to do is like, oh my gosh, be a United States soldier and go over there and be a heel.
Oh
I don't
man,
think.
a crazy gimmick. Like really, like on the surface, you look at it, it's like Sergeant Slaughter, American hero type guy, and now he flips and becomes this Iraqi sympathizer. Like holy smokes, man! If they had asked you to do a similar gimmick, maybe they've got the $1 Million Man bankrolling an American enemy. Would you have been willing to do something like that?
Uh, well, it's always been said, everybody's got a price. I don't know.
Ooh, boy. I mean, like,
Price would have to be pretty high to do that.
and people were like seriously trying to kill Slaughter. A rumor has it as he was leaving the arenas. Did you ever see any of that?
No, I did not. I didn't see any of that.
I guess they had to be really careful about how they got him out of the arenas. I want to say he was like leaving in the back of ambulances at times because like people would attack his car or try to flip it as he's trying to leave.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it resonated. He got some heat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, let's get to the Royal Rumble in 1991 here. It's at the Miami Arena in front of 16,000 fans. The Ultimate Warrior's WWF Championship reign is going to come to an end here at the hands of Slaughter, and it would mark the only time.
God.
And you're going to like this part too. That was the only time that Warrior would hold the belt. So clearly the project didn't quite work out the way that Vince had hoped because he's actually going to go back to the well with Hogan, who's going to win the Royal Rumble itself and earn a shot at Mania against Slaughter. Warrior was popular, but certainly not a guy who can carry a company on his back. And Hogan, taking on a hated American enemy at Mania just kind of made sense here, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And, I don't know. I think Vince sometimes did things. I don't know. Here, you got a guy who's, become a billionaire, and it's almost like it's like taking a challenge from somebody like, you'll never get that guy over. Oh, really? Well, just watch me, But I'll tell you that the biggest reason the Ultimate Warrior didn't get over is because he came in such a brazen way with no respect for the business, no respect for anybody else in the dressing room. And so you expect your opponent, who you don't give a shit about, to do their best to make you look good. At least come in and have the humility to admit that you don't really know what you're doing, and you welcome whatever the other guys can do to help you get there. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't him at all. He was just a A1 snob.
I think that's a really good point is that, and we've talked about Warrior at length here, so we won't bury him too much. But when the guys don't like you or respect you, like there have been other guys in the business who weren't great workers, but were able to get over because their opponents respected them and wanted to make them shine. If Warrior's opponents don't like him personally, they're probably not going to be out there acting like bump machines and putting him in the center of the ring like you would with a junkyard dog and bumping around him, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Would you say there was a lot of relief among the boys when his time with the company as flag bearer of the company was over?
Oh yeah, it's like wish it had happened sooner, right?
Man, it was nearly a year. It was the prior Mania, and look, it's the guy was over. He sold a lot of merchandise. The kids liked him, stuff like that. But man, there's something to be said when Vince is saying like, "Hey, this guy's selling plenty of merchandise for me. However, need to go a different direction here now. It's time to change." So yeah, I think that really speaks volumes. All right, Ted, let's get to your match. Yourself and Virgil are taking on Dusty Rhodes and Dustin Rhodes, and you'll capture the victory by pinning Dusty. Before the finish, you beat up on Virgil too, and now that the match is over, you want him to get back to work for you. Let's drop in on this famous moment.
Look at the eyes on Virgil.
Get the belt, Virgil, now!
Virgil. Don't do it, Birch. I understand you got to keep a job.
I'm not paying you to take your time. Get the belt.
There comes a point. Obviously, Virgil don't have no point. I'll wash my hands of it, man.
One more lesson from the $1 Million Man right here. Now get in here and wrap that thing around my waist. Wrap it around my waist.
It's going to be the story of your life, huh, Virgil?
Wait! Oh, threw it down! Yes! What do you think you're doing? You get down there and you pick that belt up right now and you wrap it around my waist. Need I tell you, need I remind you one more time about your family, about your mother?
Give me a break. Oh, you pig. Virgil, remember, it just don't matter.
Pick it up.
Remember, Virgil, there comes a point.
And wrap it around my waist.
What, are you going to eat it for the rest of your life?
How humiliating. That's right. That's right. Like I always say, everybody's got a price.
That pop.
Listen to this capacity crowd in Lubbock.
Crowd going nuts.
Virgil milking it, doing a great job.
He did. I mean, he really did that well. God bless him. I just wish that he had just a little more, I don't know. He just in-ring talent. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I bet, but in terms of all of his facials and the timing of, you can see him just starting to brew, and he did it extremely well.
He took his time. I think a lot of guys would have rushed into reaching down and picking the belt back up, but he took his time and he milked it. And then afterwards, kind of the slow look around to the crowd, like I finally did it. Man, really well done by Virgil there.
Yeah. I just wished, if he'd have been able to wrestle, it was just so hard, to have a match with him. Just was. And we got what we could out of it. And I just, again, for him, I wish that it could have gone on longer.
Now, when you're going into this angle with him and you're about to start working with him and, you're going to get to Mania, of course, did you already know at that point that there was really kind of nothing under the hood from a wrestling perspective, or was that something that you discovered as you started to work with him?
I pretty much knew it. I can remember, I can't remember a couple of the other guys who had been around him because he had been in a couple of territories, and they said they told me, they said he really doesn't have a good grip on the skills of wrestling. But the interview he did there that night, not even an interview, just the whole thing was him and his expression, and that's what got the dang thing over.
Yep.
You know, and I sincerely, you know, wished that it could have gone on longer, you know, for him.
Now, when you hear that crowd reaction, even knowing that Virgil is not a gifted in-ring performer, maybe doesn't quite have the charisma or the X factor necessary to be a super successful wrestler, when you heard that crowd reaction, were you optimistic, like, hey, I think that this is going to be something, or did you kind of know it would never really reach its full potential?
Yeah, well, I knew it wouldn't reach its full potential because, I mean, you know, he just, his wrestling was very awkward and was, you know, and
There's only so much you can get out of him.
there's only so much you could get out of him. Yeah.
Hey, look, I think it's also worth noting that you got cut by the belt there a little bit. I don't know if you saw it, but you were bleeding. Your forehead was bleeding right after being hit.
Virgil was, you know, just got a little excited about that, you know. Actually, now that you said that, I remember.
You do remember getting cut?
Got back in the dressing room. I said, Virg, next time, just remember, keep your hand between me and the belt. And I started laughing, and he started laughing too. So
it's funny because I just talked to Jim about Virgil on the Hacksaw Hour, which came out yesterday as this podcast drops. And he told the story about Jim was wrestling you, and he's kind of running around the outside of the ring, and Virgil comes out of nowhere and hits him with a really, really stiff clothesline. Jim said that he got backstage and he started yelling at Virgil, like, hey, come on, you got to be a professional. And you stuck up for Virgil and said, hey, Jim, wasn't that long ago that you were hitting me with those kind of clotheslines, pal?
yeah.
And I think that settled Jim down a little bit.
Yeah.
It's funny. But I mean, Mike was just inexperienced, not reckless, right?
Yeah. Just inexperienced, not reckless. I mean, he was legitimately a nice guy. You know, it's just bad set of circumstances.
Well, look, we're almost wrapped up here, but I do want to talk to you about something else before we go. I think it's also worth mentioning that this match will not only mark the end of Dusty's time in the WWF, but it will also mark the end of his time as a full-time in-ring worker. This is it. So Dusty is about to return to WCW in a booking role, and on his way out the door, Vince is squashing him by pretty much everybody. He's even going to lose clean to Virgil in the lead up to this match in just 45 seconds, Ted. The American Dream Dusty Rhodes doing a job for Virgil in 45 seconds. What's your take on treating a guy like Dusty that way on his way out the door? Is it fair or not so much?
You know, I didn't agree with it. You know, I don't know if sometimes that's like a rib.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, yeah, okay, you're gonna leave me high and dry. Well, okay, I'm gonna make you look like an idiot on the way out the door. I mean, and I don't know what the deal was with Vince, but you know, putting him in the polka dots and that stuff, and it kind of like, God, make it look silly, you know. But he took that ball and ran with it and made something big out of it.
It's this whole, I don't know. I know that when you leave a territory, generally speaking, you put people over and you then you leave. So you want to put people over on your way out the door, and I get that. Is it common practice though, or is it more of a Vince thing to really kind of bury a guy? Like, were other promoters really burying guys on the way out the door, or still helping them look good?
Well, no. I mean, you know, I think it was kind of a slap in the face.
And I get that Vince was trying to put the juice behind Virgil here a little bit, and you want to make him look good. But man, how about have him have a competitive match and then beat Dusty Rhodes? I think that might be the way to go.
Yeah.
Just my opinion. Well, Ted, that's going to wrap us up for this week. Before we go, I wanted to remind our listeners about something I mentioned earlier in the show. Yesterday, as this episode drops, we have released a new episode of the Hacksaw Hour on our YouTube channel. It's another Hacksaw Mailbag where Jim is answering questions from his fans and subscribers. I posted on the community tab on our YouTube page looking for questions, and the fans delivered as they always do. Jim also recently put out another video featuring one of his road trips, and Ted and I are over there providing YouTube exclusive clips from this show every week. And there is just so much more there on our YouTube page. Seriously, if you are not subscribed, you are missing out on tons of awesome free content. Get over there, get subscribed, get caught up. It's youtube.com/@everybody's-got-a-pod. Ted is getting really active on social recently. You've got to check him out at MDM Ted DiBiase on all platforms. You can follow the podcast on all platforms at Ted DiBiase Pod, and follow me and drop your questions for this show on my X account, which is Marcus P. D'Angelo. Man, Ted, I never know what direction we're going to go in when we do one of these shows, but I always know it's going to be fun and enlightening.
We jumped around a lot today, didn't we?
It was fun. I really love the conversation and love looking back at this time in your career.
Yeah, me too, buddy. And thanks for doing this with me. I appreciate it.
Man, thank you. Can't thank you enough, and can't thank our listeners enough. We'll be back next week with another one for you guys, right, Ted?
Of course. And as always, remember, everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
We'll see you guys next time right here on Everybody's Got a Pod.